What is up, guys? Welcome back to another video. Another video means another dopamine high, because the buy something that feels something. And today we're back at it with another review. And for today's review, I am taking a look at quite literally the biggest thing I have ever reviewed, and that will be NECA's Alien Queen. And the only reason I was even able to pick up this figure was because in 2023, NECA so graciously restocked this figure for Mother's Day, which is pretty funny that they decided to give us the Queen Alien as a Mother's Day gift. So knowing that I would actually be able to pick up this figure for retail price, I knew I had to jump on the opportunity and pick up this figure. And also, from my understanding, this figure was initially released all the way back in 2014 as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. And so in the terms of, getting a video out about this figure, I'm really late to the party. But seeing that, the figure got re-released and it's starting to gain some relevancy again, and since I spent a lot of money on the figure, I'm going to make a review about it. But in all seriousness, review on it or not, I am happy I do have this figure in my collection. So that being said, at any point during or after the video you realize you want to pick up this figure for yourself, you can get them for $124.99 off of Entertainment Earth, $139.99 off of the Big Bad Toy Store, which is where I got my figure, $149.95 off of the Walmart website, and then for a whopping $247.95 you can pick up this figure off of Amazon. I do not recommend picking up this figure for that much with these much cheaper options that I mentioned before you. So if the other three are unreliable sources of picking up this figure, I guess shoot for Amazon, but I don't recommend it. So yeah, there's some places where you can pick up this figure. Links in the description of the video for your ease of access. And also I have a link to the NECA article about this figure if you do like reading those articles off of the NECA website. And with all that said, let's open up this figure. So looking at the packaging, and this is a big box, so much and so that I had to take a step back to just record the box. And we can see in the window the Alien Queen looking all nice. And then on the side of the box, we get a nice photo of the Queen Alien about to devastate this Marine, which is not included for those who were wondering. Then on the other side, we can get a much more clear look at the face of the Queen Alien. And then obviously we get the title of what the figure is, if you couldn't tell just by looking at the window. And then on the top of the packaging, we get a look at that nice shell on the top of her head and some more art of the box with, her nest and whatnot. And looking at the back of the packaging, we get a nice large photo of the Queen Alien and then a brief description of what this figure is all about. And it does say some assembly required, which I will show you before anything else in the video. And to really just put this box in scale, here is a Xenomorph warrior next to it, and this is about a 7-inch tall figure, so you can kind of estimate how big this box really is based off of those measurements. So yeah, this is a big figure. So now that we have a better idea of how big this figure is just based off the packaging alone, let's open it up and get into the review. So unfortunately, while opening up the figure, I found one of the smaller arms snapped off. It was found already off the figure, so I didn't break it. I don't know what could have broke it because the figure was packaged to where nothing could have possibly touched the arm, but it is what it is. Fortunately, it's one of the smaller arms and not the more larger prominent ones, but at the end of the day, it still sucks that this happened. So the assembly that the box was talking about are for these spines. These spines go on the back of the Queen. There are 6 in total, 3 on each side. And one thing that did throw me off is when plugging these spines into the back of the Queen, there was no pop or sound or feel verifying that the spines were plugged into the back of the Queen. And also, while you're plugging these spines in, you want it to be from largest to smallest going down the spine. And I don't know if this makes me a dumbass, but I wish there were some kind of instructions telling you which spines go on which side of the body. So if it looks like I did put them on wrong, please forgive me. In hindsight, I probably could have went online and found the answer, but I'm too much of a dumbass to think of that. And one thing that absolutely drove me insane was how easy these spines fell off. Just the slightest nudge would send the spines flying. So throughout the video, I will not be having the spines on this figure for my own sanity. But after all that, that's pretty much how these spines work. I will definitely have the spines on the figure once I display them on my shelf, but as throughout this video, like I said, I'm not gonna have the spines on her back. So when it comes to the head articulation, you can have the queen look up and down a decent amount. You can't get a full 360 spin because of the carapace shield on her head, but you can still get a decent range nonetheless. And then you can get a somewhat of a partial spherical movement out of her head articulation overall. And then when it comes to the jaw, you can have her open up her mouth an okay amount, not enough to really close her mouth, but still enough to, you know, show some expression in her face. Well, as much expression as a xenomorph could express. Can xenomorphs express emotion? And then one really cool thing you can do is move the carapace shell on the top of her head back and forth. So if you want to display her in a hostile or hibernative state, you can do that. And then moving down to the neck is broken down into 2 parts. And looking at the smaller part here first, you can rotate it 360 degrees, and that's probably the most range you can get out of this part. You can kind of move it up and down, but not by a lot. But that's really it for that part of the neck. And then this second part, there's not really a whole lot you can do here either. You can kind of swivel the neck a little bit, but that's really it. So on the neck, there's just very limited neck articulation. Not that I was expecting there to be a lot in the first place. And then moving down to the arms, the tiny arms first, you can rotate them 360 degrees, which is nice to see. And then you can move them up and down a decent amount. And then moving down from that joint base at the body, you can move this elbow up and down a decent amount. You can also rotate that 360 degrees independently from the body, which is cool. And then moving down from that is the hand. And with the hand, you can also rotate that 360 degrees and bend the wrist however you please. So a lot of articulation in this tiny arm, which is cool to see. So moving from the tiny arm to the big arms, here you can rotate it 360 degrees, which is always nice to see. And then you can kind of open and close it. You can pivot it a decent range, which is nice to see on this figure. And then moving away from that down to the elbow, you can get a nice elbow end. You can have the queen open or close up her arm a decent amount. And then with that, you can rotate the forearm 360 degrees, which is cool to see on this figure as well. So moving away from that, we have the hand, and the hand you can rotate 360 degrees and bend that wrist however you please, which again is nice to see on this figure. And overall, I found myself very pleased with the arm articulation on this figure. So when it comes to the torso, you can't really get much articulation. Like, you can pivot it a little bit, but that's really about it. No rotation, nothing really that's gonna stay. It's just kind of there. So yeah, that is the torso or lack of torso articulation. So when it comes to leg articulation, you can technically rotate the legs 360 degrees. I just wouldn't recommend it because it requires you to stretch open the legs and have it grind against the body, and this is a very expensive figure, so I don't want to break off this figure's legs. And then when it comes to the, you know, joint at the thigh, you can open or pivot the legs a decent amount to help balance this figure. And then moving down to the first knee joint, you can bend it back and forth a decent amount. And then at the other knee joint, you can also get decent range bending it back and forth. And with both of the joints, you can rotate them 360 degrees. Here is the first one. And then obviously the second one can also rotate 360 degrees like I just mentioned. And then moving away from these joints down to the foot, you can bend the foot back and forth a decent amount and rotate that 360 degrees as well. And then when it comes to the toes, you can bend them up and down a decent amount and also rotate them 360 degrees. A lot of rotating in the legs. Granted, you really want to position your legs carefully so the figure can stand up and balance itself, so it does make sense. And overall, very happy with the leg articulation on this figure. And then finally, we have the tail, which you can rotate 360 degrees. And then the wire in the tail is pretty strong. It's pretty good. You can get most poses that you want out of it. So overall, very happy. This is just like every other Xenomorph tail that we have seen, but you know, to fit the scale and size of the queen. And yeah, happy with how they did this. So when it comes to my overall thoughts on the articulation for this figure, I will say NECA did exceed my expectations because I was going into this expecting for NECA to give us a just semi-articulated statue because of the sheer size of this figure, but there were parts of the body that had more range and articulation than I thought, like the arms and the leg and the tail and even the head. There were parts of the body like the neck and the torso that I expected to be very limited and not articulate well, but at the end of the day I am very grateful that the parts that do articulate well are the arm, legs, and tail. Those are very vital parts to a Xenomorph figure, at least in my opinion, and I don't know if this has to do with why I thought the articulation was going to be so bad, but I thought this was going to be a very fragile figure, and it turns out this figure is very sturdy. Don't get me wrong, you can still break this figure. I mean, look at one of the smaller arms they did break while it was in transit to my house, but I figured that the articulation was going to be so limited because of how fragile the build was going to be. But like I said, this is actually a really sturdy figure, which allowed for the articulation to be better than I thought. So yeah, if I haven't made it clear, I'm very happy with the articulation on this figure overall. So like with every Xenomorph figure, the Queen does come with a second mouth, but unlike every other Xenomorph figure, it's not already in there. There are 2 second mouths included, the first one being the one that you would just keep in her mouth at all times, and you simply put this in by just plugging the peg into the peg hole. And then obviously the second version of this mouth is the extended version that, you know, has it poking out of her mouth, and obviously you would put this in the same way as the first one where peg goes into peg hole. But there is another accessory included with this figure, and you might have seen it already throughout the video, and that is a stand, because there is no level of articulation or kind of implemented weight to keep this figure up on itself, so they did have to include a stand, which I do really appreciate, because trying to stand this figure up by itself would have been an absolute nightmare. And one thing that I do like about the stand is there is a level of variation. You can choose where the stand supports the weight of the Alien Queen with these 2 different stems, and honestly both work just fine. The figure doesn't feel loose, it doesn't feel like it's gonna fall over when either of these supports are in play. So overall, I'm very happy that NECA did think about this and included it with the figure. So when it comes to the visual presentation of this figure, obviously we all know where this is going. It's a NECA figure. I love the amount of effort and detail they put into these figures, so I have nothing but praise, and especially because this is such a larger canvas than what we're used to seeing, so they were able to get down more details than they ever, you know, could on just, you know, a Queen Alien in the scale of a Xenomorph Warrior, which would be a weird figure, honestly, but, you know, my point is bigger canvas means more details pop out, and they definitely got them with the amazing sculpt work with all the different lines and curves and indents and just everything that makes the Xenomorph design busy. They got down, and the paint job, you know, complements the sculpt work as well. All the different shades of, you know, blue and black that fade in and out of each other, and then the gold that just really pops, looks amazing. And honestly, that's all I'm gonna say. The photos can speak for themselves. You know, NECA did a really good job at making this figure look good, but like, what else did we expect? You know, NECA again is really good when it comes to the visual presentation of figures. With all that out of the way, let's take this already ginormous figure and put him in the scale. Starting off with an Alien's Xenomorph Warrior, then we have the Rhino Alien, Snake Alien, the Panther Alien, and finally the Runner Alien, also known as the Dog Alien. Then we have NECA's Predator 2 Elder Predator, aka Greyback. Jazzwares' Halo the Spartan Collection Halo 3 Master Chief. Jazzwares' The World of Halo Halo Infinite Master Chief. Hasbro Star Wars The Black Series Imperial Stormtrooper. And finally we have McFarlane's The Doomslayer. So here we are at the turntable segment of the video. This is pretty much where I go over what I like, dislike, pros, cons, strengths, and weaknesses, stuff like that. Give you all something to just, you know, bounce off of, and go down in the comment section below and get a conversation started. And I will most likely reply to your comments, because obviously I like talking about this stuff. So let's get this ball rolling. And as you all know, I don't like dwelling on the negative any longer than I have to. So we're going to talk about the sour stuff first. And in all honesty, one thing does come to mind, and it is those goddamn spines. They do look good, don't get me wrong, but keeping them on the back of the queen is an absolute nightmare. If you just breathed on the spines the wrong way, they would fall off, and that's why you don't see them all that much throughout the video. Is because if I tried to do this entire video while keeping the spines on, I think I'd lose my goddamn mind. So after this video, I'm probably going to try and secure them on her back with some kind of putty or tacky paste or something of that nature, or you can be an absolute psychopath and super glue those spines on. And that is literally my only issue with this figure. Some people might be disappointed about the lack of torso or neck articulation, but to be fair, I didn't expect for this figure to do ab crunches or any kind of acrobatics with their torso. And the neck, I guess there's more wiggle room to complain, because the neck is a very important part of the figure, and it would allow for a lot of expression for the figure when it comes to poses and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I'm not completely disappointed by it, because we can still move the legs and the arms and at least the head and tail of the figure. So I just don't see those two parts being limited in articulation necessarily the end of the world, at least when it comes to this figure. But at the end of the day, that's just my opinion. But shifting over to the realm of positivity, there is a lot to like about this figure. This is a really good looking figure. Like I discussed in the visual presentation segment, NECA got down so many details. They got so many lines and curves and indents with the sculpting. The paint job looks really good. It looks organic, and it just, overall they did a phenomenal job making this figure come to life. I'm also a big fan of how they enjoyed the inner mouth or second mouth for the queen, rather than not giving us one at all. They made it work, and it works well, so very happy with how they handled that. And another thing I really like about this figure is how they included a stand. NECA knew that this figure was not going to be able to stand up on its own whatsoever, so they included this stand so we don't have to try and play some just unfair balancing act when trying to display this figure on our shelves, but now we can do that easily because of the stand included. And honestly, that's all I really have to say about the positive and negatives of this figure. I mean, if I were to change or tweak anything about this figure, I'd make it so that the spines either click in and stay in better, or just have them permanently attached to the queen. But yeah, no, that's really about it. It's weird not having a whole lot to talk about with a NECA figure, because usually NECA figures come with a lot of accessories and features to discuss. But despite how large this figure is and how different it is when comparing it to the other Alien releases, there's not really a whole lot that comes with the figure, and not really a whole lot to discuss because we already talked about it. So with all that said, let's move on to the outro. So if you enjoyed today's video, a like and a subscription would be amazing. You don't have to comment. I get it. It's a lot of effort moving your fingers. But if you do want to bounce off anything I did say in the video, you're more than welcome to. I'll most likely reply to y'all's comments, because obviously I like talking about this stuff. And don't worry about the bell. We both know that shit is broken. And if you want to see more content like this, there's plenty of it up on the channel. I have reviewed a bunch of NECA stuff, whether it's from the Alien or Predator franchise already. And I also do dabble in the Star Wars and Halo universe. So if any of that does interest you, you're more welcome to go check that out. And with all that said, have a nice day and stay hydrated.